people to join. Hi everyone, we're just going to give it another few minutes and then we'll start, okay? Hi everyone, we'll just wait one more minute. Thank you for those who have just joined us. Okay, we're going to get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for joining us. Today's webinar is called Blockchain and Cryptocurrencies, Unraveling Their Role in Cybercrime, and we're going to begin. Let me pass over to Praveen, and he will take it from there. Thank you, Praveen.
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica. And it's indeed a pleasure to be speaking with you all today. I'm Praveen Joseph. I'm a cybersecurity consultant and trainer here at Ingram Micro, part of the cybersecurity team. And I'm really excited to be speaking to you about a topic which has been in the news for a lot of reasons for quite some time right now. And I'm sure everybody here has heard the phrase blockchain, has heard the phrase cryptocurrencies, and has always wondered exactly what really is this supposedly groundbreaking and transformative piece of technology. So I'm really excited to tell you that yes, most of the hype really is true. Most of the things you've heard about the blockchain and cryptocurrencies really are, in fact, very well grounded, and they do have a good dose of reality in them. So what I'm going to do is we have split this webinar into multiple sections, and let me just show you the agenda. I'll be speaking for about the first two sections, wherein I'll give you a quick introduction to the blockchain itself, and also an introduction to cryptocurrencies and what they really are. And within my sections, I hope to give you a deep understanding of the technologies involved and really how they function, right? And how cryptocurrencies are different from the traditional banking that you and I are very well used to as of today. And further to that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Mohammed Kataksha, who's our cybersecurity solutions architect here. And Mohammed is going to explore how blockchain and cryptocurrencies per se are playing a very critical role in cybersecurity. Now, many of you would have seen, as part of cybercrime and as ransomware attacks, like for instance, WannaCry, commissions or payments were being solicited in bitcoins. Okay, now many of us would have a basic understanding of bitcoins and how they are related to cryptocurrencies per se. Mohammed is going to take us on a journey wherein he will explore this role of cryptocurrencies in cybercrime in greater depth. Okay, so I hope you're as excited as all of us are here today at Ingram Micro. We're going to start on this really exciting webinar. Thank you so much for joining us, and here we go. All right, so what really is the blockchain? Now, like I said, a lot of hype has existed around this topic, and all of us have heard this phrase being thrown around a lot in a lot of contexts. But what I'll do is I'll take a simple non-technical analogy and help us, which will hopefully help us to understand the whole science behind the blockchain. What is the intent of the blockchain per se? So what I've shown here is a simple comparison between how people create and consume news stories as of today. All right, so on the top left, you have traditional media, which is your newspapers, you've got your cable TV channels, etc. These are authorities or, centers of power which determine what news is going to be published the next day or even on the same day in the case of TV, right? So we as citizens, we as general public, we trust these entities, the newspapers, the channels that we see on TV, we trust them for giving us correct and accurate news. We trust them with our opinions as well as our beliefs, which are based on these news stories that we see and that we consume through them. But with the advent of technologies such as Facebook and Twitter, social media is decentralizing this trust, so to say. So people like you and I, we have the power today to use Facebook or YouTube or any of these social media channels to create and actually publish news stories. Okay, when I say create, I'm not referring to the fake news stories that people actually see on Facebook. Yes, there is another side to it. But if something like a simple incident or you have an experience which is either pleasant or non or otherwise, you have the power today to actually make a story out of it. You have the power to create news out of it. So power is essentially now decentralized, and that is the change that social media has actually brought about. This very concept is what blockchain is founded on, guys. And if you look at your screens, you'll see that I brought about a simple network diagram. And those of us who are in the networking field or familiar with network architectures will kind of relate to what this is. Okay, so here you see a simple network where every computer or every node, so to say, is connected to each other, either directly or indirectly. And the missing element that you see here is we don't have a central server. Okay, so this is what is called a peer-to-peer network, and this is nothing new. People who are in networking, people who have in fact who are familiar with the concepts of torrents and P2P file sharing, they will recognize this architecture. These computers share resources, they share their files, they share their computing power also, so to say, with each other in a very well organized manner, without any central server to monitor them, to manage them, or to allocate load as well as work to each other, to these particular computers. This peer-to-peer network is the founding architecture of the blockchain. Okay, there is no central server, there is no central entity, so to say, to manage these nodes, but the blockchain exists on on this particular network. Files are openly shared between these particular nodes on the blockchain network. Everybody has visibility over it, and everybody has the control over it. There is no concentration of power. Okay, so these are some of the features of the blockchain that you see on the right side of the screen. As I said, the control is extremely distributed. It is decentralized. There is no central authority, and all stakeholders have complete visibility of what is really going on in the blockchain. Okay, so now when I say what is really going on in the blockchain, what do I really mean, guys? I have failed here to actually start with the definition of what the blockchain really is. And I've gotten a little bit into the concept, so to speak. Let me explain the definition. So a blockchain, and you can gather this from the concepts that we just described. The blockchain really is a public ledger. Okay, those of us who are familiar with financial terminologies will be very well versed with the concept of ledger, which is nothing but a consolidation of transactions. Okay, so in most cases, ledgers are not public, definitely not public. They are visible only to entities who are authorized to see them, right? Now, think about the implications when you take this ledger and you make it completely public, okay, and you don't have a single central entity that is controlling this ledger. Rather, the power is distributed across all the entities involved. So the blockchain, as I said, is a decentralized and public ledger, and you can have a ledger of whatever it is that you want. Okay, now this really depends on the industry that is talking about blockchain, and during the second part of my session, I'll be actually exploring cryptocurrencies, which is just one simple aspect of blockchain, one of the simple implications of blockchains, wherein you are using this ledger to create as well as manage money, right? You're creating money, you're also managing and transferring money across individuals. So this is a ledger of financial transactions. Think about a ledger of any other transactions that occur, for example, in the healthcare industry, data pertaining to a patient, or in the transport and logistics industry, data pertaining to the tracking of a particular shipment, right? So this is a power that blockchain really brings to these industries. You take all this data, you put it together in a single database, you make it decentralized, everybody has access to it, you make it completely transparent, and it is unalterable as well, guys, which is an additional point that we need to consider. Nobody can change these transactions. Once a block is created and added to the blockchain, it is nearly impossible to actually alter a transaction on one of these blocks. All right, now let us review some of the industry implications of this approach, right? So I just gave you a few examples, but I want you to understand in greater depth how exactly the blockchain can transform industries. And for this reason, I'm taking you on to the next slide, where we are looking at the music industry with a little bit more detail. All right, as you can see, the layout of the slide is very, very aligned to the previous slide, so you can relate the concepts as and when we go through them. Now let's look at this in a little bit more detail. I'm just going to use the annotation tool to make things a little more easy for you to track, and stay with me, please. So what are the problems that are currently plaguing the music industry, and how exactly is blockchain helping to address these problems? Okay, two of the biggest problems are what you see on the left side of your screen here: copyright infringement as well as royalty payment. What do I mean by copyright infringement? Everybody here is today familiar with the concept of illegal downloads of MP3 files. This is one of the biggest issues that is plaguing the music industry. People are able to actually download illegally songs, music, as and when they are created. I mean, it's almost instantaneous. And this is one of the biggest challenges facing the music industry. And it has also destroyed the careers of a lot of music artists. so to speak. All right, so piracy is one of the biggest issues. And the second problem on the lower left of your screen is the payment of royalty to musicians, right? So when you are an artist and you're creating music, you want to be sure that you get paid every time someone accesses your music. You don't have to be paid the full royalty. Of course, there are other stakeholders involved, and we're just coming to that in a second. But your share of the royalty has to be paid to you. Now, in today's world, this doesn't really happen because of a lot of contracts that are involved in this whole process. The contracts are controlled by various entities. We'll get to that in a second. And at the end of the day, the artists are paid unfairly or with a lot of undue delay, right? So these are issues that artists are facing as of today. And to address this, a lot of small startup companies, there are a number of them, they are actually exploring how blockchain can actually help them to address these issues. So what I'm showing you now on the second part of this particular slide, with the P2P network diagram over here, you see all the entities that are involved in a simple life cycle of a music file. So you have the artist who first creates the music, you have the consumer who finally consumes and listens to the music. What are the various entities that are involved in the middle? You have a record label, like for example, Sony Music. The artist has to go to this record label and then he has to submit the song to them. They enroll him or her with a contract, and then they control the terms of payment, and of course they go ahead with the promotion of the music. Artists also have the option of going directly to digital service providers, like for example, iTunes or Spotify. This helps them to bypass the record label and give them a little bit more flexibility and control. This is also yet another player in the whole field. There is also a possibility that a filmmaker will approach an artist and tell him or her, hey, I want to use your songs in my movies, and this is how I'm going to pay you for it, right? So that is also possible. And lastly, you have the music pirates. These are the illegal players on the field. They download these files illegally, the music files illegally, and of course, the artist has absolutely no control over them. Okay, so these are some of the issues that are plaguing the music industry, so to speak, today. How can blockchain help them to help us to address this? What blockchain is proposing is the creation of what we call a smart contract. Okay, so a smart contract is a term that you will hear in a lot of literature when you read about the blockchain. This is the binding principle through which organizations or industries per se can actually exploit blockchain to transform the entire processes. Okay, so what really is a smart contract? It's nothing but a piece of code which is written in such a way that certain functions are carried out when a certain condition is being met. Okay, so consider an example of an artist who is just creating a new song. Now, this song file, the MP3 version of the file or whatever it is, has to be encoded into the smart contract. Copyright information has to be added to the smart contract. The lyrics of the song, what are the digital rights that various entities have over the song, the contact information of the various stakeholders, all this has to be tied into the smart contract. Okay, and then just give me a minute. Yeah, sorry for that. And then the smart contract has all these terms and conditions built into it. And then the conditions for payment are also built into the smart contract. So when a certain condition, like for example, this consumer has downloaded the song or he is streaming the song from a certain website, when this particular condition is met, all the various stakeholders are paid out according to their relevant licenses or as per the terms of royalty. Of course, music pirates will not be allowed into this whole stream because, as I said, the blockchain is unalterable. Music files cannot be accessed or modified without permission. So entities who are not authorized in this whole process can under no circumstances download or access these files. So you have distributed control, which is the decentralization of power. All these entities have equal and clear visibility over the transactions pertaining to music files. Everything is transparent to them, and of course, files are not alterable. They cannot be misused. They cannot be reused without authorization of the stakeholders. Perfect, guys. So I hope this example set things in a little bit of context. What I'm going to do is I'll take you to another example just to throw a little bit more light into another way of looking at things. Take the example of the education sector. Now, this is yet another sector where the blockchain can bring in some transformations. What are the problems? I'm going to use the same syntax. What are the typical problems that exist as of today? We have centralization of power. Now, most of the power lies in the hands of the university, and of course, most universities are regulated. But when a single student is, has a dispute or any other disagreement with the university, most of the power really does lie in the hands of the university as of today. And there is another issue of fraud being carried out by students. What do I mean by this? People or students per se actually create fake certificates, fake degrees, inaccurate reporting of their test scores, etc. And they use these documents for job applications or when they're applying for admission to other universities, etc. So these are two major problems existing in the education sector today. And how does a blockchain help us to address this? Let's take a look. What the blockchain proposes is the creation of records. The creation of records represented as blocks, and each of these records has details on the complete educational history of the student itself. Okay, so this your test scores, your degree attestation, your performance at work, your project reports, all this will be recorded and stored on the blockchain. And of course, all these entities that you see on this particular diagram, namely the universities, employers, or anybody, so to speak, sometimes even government bodies demand your educational degrees to make sure that you are eligible for visa approvals. Employers, of course, for job applications. All these entities will have complete visibility over the complete educational background of the student. So things are transparent to everybody, and of course the students cannot create fake certificates because these are unalterable. And most importantly, the power is decentralized. The university does not have most of the power concentrated with it. The student has equal authority over the university because everybody is now accountable. All the records are auditable. Perfect. Now, when you think about the implications of what this blockchain technology really means, how many people are actually running to embrace it? Okay, it's not really a massive number if you think about it, for various reasons. Because many industries today have existing solutions which are fairly good. Most of the concepts we just discussed are achievable by existing solutions to certain degrees of efficiency. However, blockchain has the potential to transform these existing setups and bring in a whole new level of process efficiencies, visibility, as well as accountability, most importantly. So yes, industries and governments are sometimes adopting them at a very rapid pace. Sometimes they're really slow or not even interested in this. But we need to appreciate the fact that this has a lot of life-changing implications for these industries. All right, guys. With these two sectors, I would like to give you a little bit of an overview about the other sectors as well. I had lightly touched upon these in one of the earlier slides, but I'll quickly run you through them. So we looked at healthcare, we looked at we looked at the music industry, we looked at education. With other industries which can actually benefit from this include the healthcare sector as well as the real estate sector. I'll quickly cover them as well. In healthcare, what is the main issue? One of the issues that is plaguing them is correct maintenance of the medical history of a patient as well as securing it at all points in time. Those of us who are from the security space will be very familiar with HIPAA, which is one of the regulations pertaining to security of health information. Making sure this patient health information is protected and accessible to all entities in an accurate way. That is one of our serious challenges, one of the serious challenges facing the industry today. With blockchain, you can of course create a public and unalterable record of the healthcare information of the patient and make it accessible to authorized entities. So when I said public, it is accessible to authorized entities like the other new doctors of the patient or new hospitals to which the patient is being transferred, insurance agents. All these people need to have accurate visibility of the patient's health information. So claims are being made correctly and can be validated at all points in time. So blockchain gives us a way to address this. Similarly, in real estate, we spoke about smart contracts, and I told you smart contracts are actually transforming the way business is being done in a lot of sectors, because if you think about it, all businesses operate on the basis of contracts. So a simple example is in real estate, wherein we have our rental agreements or rental contracts. If you create a simple smart contract which automates the whole process of rent payment as well as provisioning of keys and removal of keys from the tenant, you have a lot of process efficiencies which can be built into the real estate sector. And like I said, not everyone is rushing to embrace this, but this is definitely something which can bring in a lot of value and a lot of process efficiencies in the long term. Again, transport and logistics as well as travel, these two sectors are kind of interrelated because they are concerned with the movement of goods and persons. The principle essentially is the same, using a single identity through which one can track either a shipment in transport and logistics or a passenger in travel. This is how blockchain can actually be used to share information, real-time information pertaining to an entity across various sectors, across various entities. So, for example, if you're traveling and I mean, think about the documents you need to carry when you travel abroad, right? So you need to carry your passport, you have to have your tickets in hand. You might need something specifically for customs clearance and things like that. There's a lot of documentation that you need to carry at the end of the day when you travel. And if you're traveling as a family, I don't need to tell you, it can be a little painful, right, with kids around. So think about blockchain and how this can add value to you. All you need is your digital blockchain ID, and all entities concerned can track you using this one particular ID. So this can be your airline they can use this identity, your blockchain ID to track your booking, your registration, the fact that you have checked in and how many bags you've checked in. And of course, immigration authorities can also use it for clearance of your immigration, as well as your immigration formalities, right? So the whole process can be streamlined across various entities if blockchain is used for all these entities to talk to each other and share information with each other. Great. With that context, guys, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Like I said, not all governments are or industries per se are rushing to embrace blockchain, but yes, a few of them are definitely ambitious enough to be in the forefront. Dubai is one of the leading countries, one of the leading emirates in the world, which is ambitious enough to be a pioneer in the space of blockchain. They have in fact published that they want to be a fully blockchain-enabled government by the year 2020, and banks like Emirates and NBD have already started integrating blockchain into their checks. Europe has also been no exception. In fact, the European Commission, with the executive body of the EU, they have actually approved a proposal, proposed the establishment of a blockchain observatory, which will be funded at 500 million euro. So this is quite a significant development, and essentially what they want to do here is see and find out how blockchain can be used to improve performance at public bodies, and also at the end of the day improve the lives of citizens in the EU. Okay, the US is also not far behind. The Department of Homeland Security has granted $1 million as a grant to one of the blockchain startups, and of course government agencies such as the Pentagon are exploring how blockchain can be used to improve their business processes and bring in value at the end of the day. Japan is another country which is extremely ambitious in terms of blockchain adoption. In fact, a project has been announced which concerns the exploration of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, essentially, concerning the top 3 banks in Japan. And Bitcoin has been adopted as one of the legal currencies in Japan. Right, guys. So with that, let me move on to the second section of my presentation, wherein I'm going to talk a little bit about cryptocurrencies. Now, during the entire course of my presentation so far, you would not have heard me use the term Bitcoin until the last slide when I just said that Japan has legalized Bitcoin as one of their currencies. So what really is Bitcoin, and why have I not mentioned it so far? What are cryptocurrencies? What is blockchain? I hope you understood that by now. And how are all these 3 terms, interrelated to each other? We're going to find out in this particular section. And I hope, as I said earlier, you are as excited as we are about this whole concept. Okay, I'm going to start with a quick introduction to the origin of cryptocurrencies and essentially the blockchain itself. If you notice, I hadn't discussed where the blockchain started and exactly how it came about. But if you think about it, blockchain is essentially only a platform. It is, as I said, a decentralized and public ledger of transactions, and it can be used for creating a number of concepts. Cryptocurrencies is just one of these concepts. Okay, now the whole concept of cryptocurrencies was invented by an anonymous entity who goes by the pseudonym essentially Satoshi Nakamoto, which is here on the left side of your screen. Now, this individual published a paper in 2008, which spoke about a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, which you see on the center of the slide. And this paper is still available for anybody to reference. It's on the Bitcoin website. And on this particular paper, Nakamoto had actually described the whole concept of a blockchain. He described a peer-to-peer network where transactions are public. There is no central authority, and these transactions are unalterable. And he invented and he proposed a new currency which he named Bitcoin. All right, so he had actually invented the whole concept of blockchain with the idea of introducing cryptocurrencies, and his cryptocurrency, he called it Bitcoin. With the passage of time, now if you see, this was in 2008. Over the past few years, industries and other governments have woken up to the realities of the whole blockchain and realized that they can adopt it for their processes as well. So what was Nakamoto's intention in publishing this paper? They were manifold, but the most notable ones were he wanted to eliminate concentration of power with a central authority, and he wanted to address the issue of double spending. What do I mean by double spending? This is one of the biggest issues with digital currency, which is making sure the same same unit of currency cannot be spent twice by the same person. Okay, so he wanted to make sure that this issue was being addressed. And how did he do that? We're going to see in just about a minute. What really are cryptocurrencies? Okay, now this slide reiterates many of the points that we just discussed, guys. The whole concept of Bitcoin is something which is completely virtual. There is no such thing as a physical Bitcoin. Of course, you can exchange your Bitcoins to purchase other currencies like USD or Euro or anything, but there is no physical coins of, physical versions of Bitcoin. They're completely virtual coins. And like we mentioned many times in the past, it is based on the principle of decentralized authority. Power is distributed across all entities, all the nodes on the P2P network that we just saw. We don't have a central authority. We don't have a bank or a regulatory authority. And since we don't have a regulatory authority, anybody can join the Bitcoin. It is completely permissionless. So irrespective of whether you've got a criminal background or you've got 3 court cases pending against you, it doesn't matter. All you need to do is sign up on Bitcoin or any other of the Bitcoin wallets, and you can start using Bitcoins. You can start transacting day in and day out. Now, this is one of the reasons Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are so popular with cybercriminals, and my colleague Mohammed is going to discuss about that in greater detail. And like I said earlier, right, transactions on the blockchain are unalterable. So once a payment is made, it is literally set in stone. Nobody can change it. They cannot be canceled. They cannot be reversed. All right, the cryptocurrency market is crowded with a lot of players, but the most notable ones would be of course Monero, Ethereum, Litecoin, Bitcoin, and Ripple. You see the logos on the right side of the screen. Of all these, Bitcoin happens to be the first and currently also the most popular cryptocurrency in circulation today. In fact, when it started trading, it was way back in March 2010, and it was worth just $0.03 on that day. But as of this morning, if you check it, one Bitcoin is equivalent to 6,500 USD. So it has appreciated many times in value over the years, over just about 7 years. And people who had the mind to invest in Bitcoin just about a few years ago would be millionaires many times over today. All right, guys, with that, I'm going to take you down to the next slide, wherein I'm quickly going to compare cryptocurrencies with the traditional banking that you and I are used to. Okay, so this column on the left talks about traditional banks. Most of us or all of us here today have a bank account, and we are used to the fact that we have to trust the bank to safeguard our money. So traditional banking is built on the foundation of trust, whereas cryptocurrencies are founded on math. It's basic cryptographic algorithms and mathematics. There's no up or down about it. It's very simple and straightforward. And of course, the central bank of a country controls the supply of currency for that country. They create a deficit or they create a surplus depending upon the economic situations of the country. Whereas with Bitcoins, supply is fixed, and it is estimated to be 21 million Bitcoins by the year 2140. So there is a mathematical way in which the supply of Bitcoins is limited. We'll talk about that in a bit. And of course, coming down to transactions, you can reverse your transactions in case you have been scammed or you're the victim of a fraud activity. Banks can actually reverse the transactions for you, and definitely the transactions are discreet. They are known only to the entities involved and of course to the bank. No, they are definitely not public. But with Bitcoin, like I said, the transactions are irreversible, and everybody on the network has access to view these transactions. Which brings us to the next question. If I transact on the Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency network, does everybody get to see how much money I'm holding or what money I'm sending to others in back? The answer is no, because you will be identified only by your ID on the Bitcoin wallet, okay, or whatever wallet you are using on the Bitcoin, on the cryptocurrency network. And this ID does not have to be tagged to your other real identities, right? So this is where the element of anonymity is built in. Your real identity can be kept confidential, whereas with your bank, you know that your privacy is not, it's not unlimited. The bank has visibility over your transactions, and if required, they can share it with law enforcement or other regulatory authorities for any investigations that might be required against you. Perfect. So guys, on this slide, I will be taking a slightly mathematical approach and trying to explain the flow of a simple Bitcoin transaction. As you can see, we're using the same network that was used on the previous slides, the same peer-to-peer network. And I'm going to take a simple example of money being sent from a sender over to the recipient. Okay, as you can see on the screens, they have something which is known as a Bitcoin wallet. It has been downloaded and installed on their laptops. And a Bitcoin wallet essentially is a client application or a client piece of software that anybody has to download and install on the laptops or phones if you want to be a part of the Bitcoin network. Okay, so what really is the wallet? It lets you sign in, it lets you access the network, but at the end of the day, it is essentially a collection of addresses. It gives you a bunch of addresses, and each of these addresses essentially has a balance in terms of number of Bitcoins that they hold. So for example, you might have 5 Bitcoins on this one particular address, and you might have only 1 on this one particular address. Okay, so your balance is essentially represented on these addresses, and each address also has a public as well as a private key, so it has a cryptographic key pair associated with it. Now, if you think about it, it is really tempting to relate this to your account numbers, right? So each address is essentially my account number, is it? Well, the answer is no, and we'll see in a bit how this particular address is used in a simple transaction. Okay, so moving on, assume that this particular entity the sender needs to send money over to the recipient. What happens is the recipient shares his public key with the sender. Okay, so the public key for a new address, for a new Bitcoin address, is shared with the sender, and it is recommended that you create a new address for every transaction, because this is one of the ways where it makes it difficult to track you or trace the transaction back to you. So the recipient creates a new address, he shares a public key over to the sender. The sender creates a new transaction on his Bitcoin wallet, and this particular transaction is encrypted with his own private key. Okay, so, and of course, a public key is associated with the transaction, so anybody on the network can authenticate this particular transaction to the sender. So if to quickly recap, the recipient had shared the public key of his address over to the sender, and the sender had actually created a new transaction and encrypted it with his own private key. Okay, the public key is still associated with it. Now, this particular transaction has now been created and it is floating around on the network. What happens next? This is where the whole magic of the Bitcoin network comes in, wherein you have something called a miner. Okay, now miners are entities who are responsible for validating transactions, confirming them. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk a bit more detail on what they do. But essentially, what they do is they consolidate transactions. So you have transaction number 1, you have transaction 2, 3, 4, for example. All transactions that happen within a 10-minute window, they are consolidated and they are hashed. Okay, so you create a hash value of each transaction, you consolidate them again, you create a consolidated hash, and finally you arrive at a single, unique, and consolidated hash function. And this is what is known as a Merkle tree of transactions. Guys, if you're not familiar with the concept of hashing, it is a process of converting a piece of data which has any variable length and taking it and converting it into an alphanumeric string of a fixed length. Okay, now this is a one-way function and it is very, very difficult to reverse it. Okay, so this is one way in which you can create consistency in your data files. You can make sure your hash has a consistent and fixed uniform length. Also, you have a way of making sure people have no way of reverse engineering what you have done to your data. Okay, so it's a great way of protecting integrity of your data files, and this is essentially where your transactions integrity is protected. They cannot be altered. But wait for it. There's a little bit more detail that comes in. So you have the hash value of all the transactions within a 10-minute window, which is consolidated into this one single hash you see here. The previous block, which is the latest block added to the transaction, added to the blockchain. Let's assume that is this block. The hash of this particular block is also taken. Okay. And then there's something else called the proof of work, which is where the Bitcoin miners come in. I'm going to take you to it in a minute on the next slide. All these entities, these 3 entities, go into the creation of the new block. So as you can see, the block has all the transactions that happen in a 10-minute window. it has a reference to the previous block. Now, this is extremely important because this shows how the blocks are interrelated to each other. They are intertwined. Each block is directly related to the subsequent one. So reverse engineering these transactions, trying to alter a transaction that happened, let's say yesterday, would require you to alter all the blocks that have been newly added to the blockchain since yesterday, and that is almost near impossible. Like I said, hashing is nearly impossible to reverse engineer, right? Right. So this is how once a new block is created, it gets added. The green block that you see here, a new block is created on the blockchain. It has all the transactions that you see. All right. Now, in the interest of time, I'm quickly going to jump out to the next slide. I mentioned about hashing. I'm sorry, I mentioned about mining. What really is Bitcoin mining? And I have to spend a little focus here because this is essential or crucial to the whole structure of the blockchain network itself. So what really is mining? I told you this is one of the components that goes into the creation of the block. Mining is a process of confirming a transaction and also creation of new Bitcoins. If you remember, I said that the supply of Bitcoins is limited to 21 million Bitcoins, and it is expected to be reached by the year 2140. So we still have about 123 years to go, I think. But at the end of the day, how this happens is it is done through the process of mining. Who does mining? Anybody. Anybody can be a Bitcoin miner. All you need is really, really good computing power. A computer which has, let's say, an ASIC chip with really good RAM and good memory, because believe me, the process of mining is really, really computing intensive of your computing power. And of course, you should have an understanding of how Bitcoins work and a little bit about math as well and cryptographic algorithms. So essentially what happens is in mining is, you remember this value hash1234 from the previous slide, which is a hash of all your transactions. It is subjected to a hash function, and a random value called the nonce is added to it. Okay, so this randomness makes it a little more complex because this random value plus the hash of your transactions, when it gets hashed, the output has to meet a specific condition. It has to have, for example, a specific number of zeros. Miners compete with each other to identify what is the nonce, the box in red, which nonce is going to give you this desired output. Okay, they compete with each other. The winning miner is rewarded with newly created Bitcoins as well as the transaction fees. So every time a miner successfully mines a block, a certain number of Bitcoins is newly created, plus he's also paid transaction fees. And these newly created Bitcoins are credited to his Bitcoin address. So essentially he gets paid at the end of the day, right? So the math of it is a little difficult to get at the first instance. So I'll quickly reiterate: the hash of the transactions plus a random value called the nonce is subjected to a hash, and the output has to meet certain specific conditions. Okay, so this way you have miners who are verifying your transactions. They compete with each other. So again, there is no concentration of power, and plus you have new Bitcoins being created, guys. So the whole beauty of it is the way in which everything is distributed across entities. And you don't really need a central bank. You don't need a single authority to control it. This is how cryptocurrencies work. Think about the implications for your industries as well, and think about how this is actually going to help in cybercrime. Okay, with that context, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Mohammed to take you through the role of cybercrime, the role of cryptocurrencies in cybercrime. Thank you, guys, and I'll reiterate: if you have any questions, please do feel free to type them in. We'll have a specific section just for your questions. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Praveen. Just move this. It's the same one. And I don't need. All right, guys. Hello. Okay. Okay.
Screen sharing is closed.
All right. I'm not sure if everybody can see the screen now. All right, everybody. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening. I hope the presentation have been informative for you so far. I'm going to try to expedite my presentation a little bit so we can make it to the 1 hour. So basically, I'm going to divide my presentation into 2 sections. Into one section that will talk about the cybersecurity and the blockchain and the cryptocurrencies role into cybersecurity, and the other section is about the cybercriminal uses of the blockchain and the cryptocurrencies and how these technologies contribute with the crimes, the cybercrimes that we see every day. So I will start with the first area, which is the cybersecurity. So the common problem that so the first solution that it's very common that the blockchain helps with today's traditional authentication process. And I mean by traditional, the process that is uses simple and logins and decentralized architecture for authenticating the users and devices. This is a weak process, especially if the users use passwords that are easy to crack or steal. So blockchain takes the responsibility for a strong authentication and resolving the single point of attack at the same time. In addition to that, decentralized architectures helps provide agreement between parties for their identification. So the solution here is called distributed authentication system. So in traditional centralized authentication process, the human factor is an essential part of authenticating users and devices. But in the distributed authentication system, the human factor is eliminated, therefore preventing it from becoming a potential attack vector. The distributed authentication system is authenticating users and devices without the need for a password by leveraging distributed public key infrastructure, also known as a distributed PKI, to authenticate the users and devices. So instead of a password, it gives each device a specific SSL certificate, and the certificate is managed over the blockchain platform. And this makes it virtually impossible for malicious hackers to use fake certificates for the authentication. So the second solution or example of the blockchain application in the cybersecurity is regarding the well-known messaging applications that we all deal with, like WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and WeChat, etc. So none of these applications effectively protect the metadata of the communication. When I say metadata, I mean basically the information about who's communicating with whom. So secure anonymous messaging is the application from blockchain or that was built on blockchain technology that is use blockchain decentralized architecture, which cannot be censored or controlled by any single source. In addition, communications of metadata is scattered throughout distributed architecture and cannot be gathered at one central point, reducing the risk of surveillance through such digital fingerprints. So, and also blockchain can help us in protecting against DDoS attacks. So that is happening by using a combined utilized bandwidth of connected computers around the world to make the website of a web application or a website running faster and protect them from any DDoS attack. So in other words, the DDoS attackers cannot attack the website because it doesn't reside on a server or a cluster of servers. Instead, it's running on a large number of servers distributed around the world. So it will make it very difficult to the attacker to target their attacks to a specific cluster of servers. So in return, usually in such platforms or DDoS protection solutions, the contributors or the service providers that is contributing in carrying on the bandwidth or the throughput of these services or servers are paid for their services using a marketplace that is built on that or inside that blockchain platform. The first solution that I'm going to talk about, or the area that blockchain can help in cybersecurity, is to protecting against fraud. So companies can save billions of dollars with fraud protection using blockchain. And that is to combat reporting fraud such as overstatement of revenues. So in addition to continuity, irrevocability, and irreversibility of blockchain nature, the blockchain ledger could prevent management from creating fictitious transactions or backdating options. So this will help, the auditors and the forensics accountants to access and to examine the transactions and make sure that everything is working without any fraud. Furthermore, the risk of receiving checks without sufficient funds can be avoided. Therefore, blockchain is not only increases the chance of detecting fraud, but also pressure management to reduce earnings manipulation. So with this, I ended the section about how blockchain and cryptocurrencies contribute or help in achieving cybersecurity. So now I will move to the next section, which is talking about the cybercriminal and cybercrimes and how they are using blockchain and cryptocurrencies technologies in their acts. So the first crime that I'm going to talk about is the ransomware. Which is, this is a well-known for everybody. Almost everybody heard about ransomware, especially recently. So with the blockchain and the cryptocurrencies are getting popular, criminals have started taking advantage of that ransomware. And since the payment of the cryptocurrency is anonymous and private, so the criminal identity cannot be disclosed. So this is a perfect choice for criminals to be used for the payments of their ransom crime. So therefore, the users or the victims will not know who's attacking them. So basically, here I will start with each crime to highlight some technologies and solutions that we can use and we can implement in our enterprises today to protect against each type of the crimes that I'm going to talk about. So I will start with the ransomware. So a strong network and endpoint solution need to be implemented. And up-to-date NG firewall with an next-generation IPS, an antivirus well configured and well tuned. Web proxy and email security also that will help to protect users against attacks that is coming through the channel of the web or the email, and also security practices. And when I say security practices, I'm talking about the basic practices like data backup, patch management or security patches, configuration compliance to a well-known compliances and benchmark like CIS benchmark and NIST checklist, and like some other assessment processes like vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. So a well-known example here about this crime, the ransomware crime, is the WannaCry, and I will not spend so much time on it. We all know about this crime and we all heard about it in the news. So I just wanted to link it to our crime here. The second one is the phishing. And basically the criminals uses, tricks the users to steal the information of their wallets, which was explained by Praveen before. So and once they have access or credentials or login to the users or to the victims' wallets, they will steal their money, and the phishing act is happening. So what really we advise is to implement strong anti-phishing solutions and also to implement user awareness campaigns and trainings to make sure that the users are empowered with enough information and tools to protect against phishing attacks. So a well-known example is the blockchain.info website phishing campaign that happens multiple times. And in the recent time, so the attackers or the criminals were asking the users through a well-crafted email to download a backup for their wallet of blockchain.info, which is really not the case. They are trying to steal this wallet from them. So the third crime is that dark web transactions, which the criminals are using the cryptocurrencies to in the black markets to sell their goods, such as drugs, personal details, and even guns. And here, really, we advise you to implement some endpoint security management solutions to make sure that the special browsers that the users are using to access the dark web are not being installed. in addition to the web proxy to monitor the web surfing traffic, and also to the DLP to control and monitor any traffic that is going to be related to the dark web or the dark web transactions. And here are some screenshots and examples about that. Okay, so I'm moving on to the next crime, which is the exploit. And exploit basically is trying to find a vulnerability inside an OS or application or platform, and use that exploit or exploit that vulnerability to hack the system and try to steal information or money. But most likely in the cryptocurrency and the blockchain is a money. And the biggest example on that is the blockchain based venture capital, which is called the DAO. This is an online venture capital based on blockchain that was, built by users, and they were thinking that this is something that cannot be hacked and can be independent entity on the internet for fund raising and for venture capital. But this was not the case. So hackers managed to attack them and to steal at least $60 million during that campaign. So the last crime that I'm going to talk about is the Ponzi scheme, which is basically a type of fraud operation where the operators generates the returns for the older investors through the revenue that is paid by the new investors. So they are taking from the new and giving to the old. So they will fake that they are making any legitimate business and any return from their business, while they are taking from new investors and giving to the old one. And this is related to to the what they call it ICO, initial coin offering. So recently we have noticed that so many ICOs happening are tend to be Ponzi scheme, and the biggest example is the well-known OneCoin platform, which was claiming to be the next Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency, but it turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. So I hope that you enjoyed so far the information about the cybersecurity and the cyber crimes related to blockchain and the cryptocurrency. So I'm going just to quickly go through our portfolio that is, protecting against these cyber crimes that we talked about. And here I'm listing the information, or the technologies that we mentioned during the slides, and I'm linking them to the vendors from Ingram Micro profile. So as you can see, for example, Cisco is covering multiple network APT endpoint, NG firewall, and web proxy, email proxy, etc. McAfee, they are covering network and endpoint APT. They are covering NG firewall, antivirus, web proxy. Symantec covering multiple products, and so on. And since I mentioned about best practices about the vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, I just wanted to remind you that Ingram Micro, as a value-added distributor, we distribute our products and solutions along with services and training. Services that can be either assessment services or consultancy, or either a remote managed services to manage your security ecosystem or your customers' security ecosystems. And trainings that can be not vendor related, that can be cybersecurity related training, starting from the foundation till the deep and expert level trainings. These are the details of the services that we have. Assessment and consultancy and managed services. So please, if you have any question about these services or the trainings, here are the slides of the detailed training. Please let us know, and we will be more than happy to answer that. So I hope this has been informative for you, and with that I end my presentation, and I will leave you now with my colleague Vikram to give you some updates and about our recent initiatives.
Thank you for that, Mohammed. Hello, everybody. This is Vikram here, and I handle the business support activities for the cybersecurity business unit. So I'm just going to quickly take you through our recent initiatives and activities. And now, as you can see here, we have the Ingram Micro Cloud and Security Summit which is happening from the 19th to the 21st of November, which is basically next week, first half. If you've already bought your tickets, we look forward to welcoming you there. But if you haven't, you can still buy your tickets at http://ingrammicrocloudsummit.me. We have very few spots remaining, so please go ahead and buy your tickets. At the summit, you will be able to attend multiple keynote sessions and breakouts on both domains, cloud and security. So yeah, very interactive. Looking forward to having you there. We're also pleased to announce the launch of our monthly cybersecurity newsletter. It's going to be called the Ingram Micro Cyber Bite. A lot of you would have already received the first edition of it. If you haven't, please check your junk email and whitelist it, so the rest of the months go directly into your inbox. You're going to be able to see a lot of interactive news here, a lot of interesting stuff. Please do whitelist it. Our next announcement is the Ingram Micro cybersecurity website. You can access it at security.ingrammicro.com. It is live. Here you will be able to see all our documents on our services, as well as the vendors that we distribute per location. You'll also be able to book sessions with our consultants. So please do go ahead and have a look there and get back to us if you need anything. We're also doing a lot of enablement sessions as to what we have on offer as the cybersecurity business unit. As you already know, we do a lot of assessment services, consultancy, and training in terms of cybersecurity. So please do get in touch with us and we can set up an enablement session for you, either on premise if you're available in the UAE or through WebEx. We're also still offering our free public discovery report. This is a free of cost service that we're offering to you for 2 of your end customers. In this report, you'll be able to see all the publicly available information about the organization. So do let us know if just with the name of the client, and we can make these reports for you. Finally, our cybersecurity trainer is conducting free foundational trainings on cybersecurity. This will include trending topics such as ransomware and phishing, as well as basic do's and don'ts when it comes to cybersecurity. So do get in touch with us. I'm going to put our contacts on the next slide so you can drop us an email and we can definitely take care of that for you. That's all in terms of activities. Like I said, this is the team. Our trainer is Praveen and our senior consultant is Mawiya. Muhammad just joined us as our cybersecurity solution architect, and we have Jessica doing the marketing, as well as me, Vikram, on the business support. So yeah, get in touch with us in case you need anything, and we can definitely take care of your requirements. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everybody for staying with us for the webinar. If anyone has questions at all, if anyone has any questions at all about everything that we've seen, then please do type them now and we will answer them for you. So we'll just wait a couple of minutes for some questions to come in.
Yeah, what are these?
Okay, so we've got one question.
No.
Okay, so Praveen's going to take over for this particular question.
Sure. Thank you. And we have a question which pertains to the whole process of the Bitcoin mining. There's a question on the nonce value. How is the nonce value verified? And if there's only one successful miner and the others stop the process once one is successful, then who does the cross checks? Okay, so the question really pertains to the nonce value which we discussed on one of the slides, a random value which is added to the hash of the transactions, and this correct nonce value is the one which actually solves the cryptographic puzzle. No, the answer to this is there really isn't any central authority, as I said, which verifies the accuracy of the nonces, but rather these are all cryptographic algorithms which are coded into the network itself. So the answer for each question is already pre-built. Okay, so the challenge of the miners is really to find out what is the correct input which will generate the correct output, the desired output, right? So the output is already predetermined for a particular value. It has to meet certain conditions, and only one nonce can actually help to resolve this issue. Again, if there is an issue, there is a situation where two miners at the same time they determine the solution to the to the puzzle. There are mechanisms to actually address this, wherein a tie is created between these two. Between the two miners. So there are solutions to resolve the ties as well, not dispute, but tie resolution mechanisms are also built into the whole system. But again, bear in mind, the whole concept of central regulation does not exist. There is nobody to cross-check everything, because as I said, the entity that we trust here is math. There is no person or organization that controls it. Okay, is there any blockchain adoption in any other Arab countries except for Dubai? With my understanding, based on my updates on the news, Saudi is also definitely very active in this whole field. In fact, I do believe there is a Bitcoin ATM which is active in Saudi. And as you know, Saudi is really moving towards embracing technological transformation of the entire nation. And definitely they do want to be in the forefront when it comes to blockchain. But the most active one, the one that's leading the forefront, is Dubai as of today with the strategies that we discussed. Thank you, Ahmed Mohammed, for that question. Any other questions, guys? Okay. All right, guys, I think we'll wrap it with that. And if you have any further questions, do feel free to write to us. You have our contacts up on the slides. Thank you so much for your attention and for your time. On behalf of the entire Ingram Micro cybersecurity team, this is Praveen Joseph, and we're signing off. Thank you.